Okay, I do believe we are live. Welcome to another Sunday morning Eurorack Patch Lab. If you're catching me on the replay, thanks very much for tuning in. The very first thing I'm going to do today is attempt to find this stream on my channel so that I can chat if anyone tunes into the stream. Okay, here we are. Looks like we are live on the channel. Fantastic. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to check out the patch that I've currently got in the system right now. And in a few minutes, we're going to pull all of these cables and we're going to attempt to patch something from scratch today. Here's what I've got in this system right now. It's kind of like a chilled dub techno patch. If anyone is tuning in and can let me know if the audio is okay, if you can hear my voice over the music when I turn the music up all the way like this. Hey, we got 6 people watching already. Thanks for joining me. Hey, Mike. Can you hear my voice over the music? All right. Hey, what's happening, Sean? Hey, String Machine. Thanks for joining me, everyone. This is a really smooth dub techno patch that I've been working on since about yesterday afternoon, I suppose. The patch that I had in the system before this that I was attempting to put together for this stream just didn't sort of work out really. I had probably more cables involved than any other patch that I had made, and it just, I don't know, it just, something about it just wasn't quite right. So I needed to pull all of those cables yesterday and start again from scratch to create something for us to start with today. I'm really happy with this chill dub techno groove, and we're going to talk about some of the details that make up this groove. Oh, hey, Sky Tortoise Ferryman, thanks for joining me. All right, good to see you guys. Let's talk about some of the elements that I'm using to create this groove. I'm going to start muting some tracks here so that I can show you guys some of the individual pieces. I'm currently using the Squarp Rample to play back a chord stab on the downbeat of every 8 bars. I've got that chord stab running through the Des Modus Versio reverb from Noise Engineering, and it's set to a pretty wet setting with a lot of regen, so we get this atmosphere that hangs in the air. So the chord sample hits at the beginning of 8 bars, but then the reverb sort of picks up the tone of that chord sample, and it just holds it in the air for us. I've got a bass line happening, a really simple bass line, coming out of the Lifeforms SV1B from Pittsburgh Modular. So we've got just some chilled bass happening. I'm using a noise algorithm from the braids oscillator. This is the Blue Lantern modules version of the braids oscillator. And I'm using it here to play back a noise on the upbeat. Kind of taking the place, actually this is the cymbal one on the left, I'm sorry. This is sort of playing like a noisy sort of cymbal on the upbeat. And what I've got is I've got the noise playing 16th notes rather. you listen close, we hear these 16th notes that are kind of keeping rhythm over our bass line and our chord texture. I'm using our master clock of 16th notes to just go ahead and trigger this Blue Lantern module's braids module set to the noise algorithm. So we've got an upbeat from the cymbal algorithm from the braids oscillator, and then in the background, fading in and out, we've got that double time. Hey Ed, hey Travarsi, thanks for joining me guys, I appreciate you being here. The kick drum today is a sample coming out of the Tip Top Audio 1 sample module. The clap is also a sample, and it's coming out of a second Tip Top Audio 1 sample module. But what I think is just the most amazing thing here in this patch so far is the way that the chord stamp just sort of evolves and moves. I'm going to be quiet for a minute and just jam the patch a little bit. And what I want you to know as I'm working this is that I'm literally going to be turning the tracks on and off, but that's pretty much about it. The ebb and the flow of the vibe of this jam is literally happening from, I think the meat of this is being set up by the tone setting on my reverb on the Desmodus Versio. I've got an LFO gently moving the tone, so we're sort of sweeping our loud reverb in the mix down to a low frequency tone, and then we're sort of moving that high frequency content around. But it's happening just on the reverb, and it's happening very slowly. So if I turn up the volume again to max, and we just let the groove play for a minute or so, you're going to hear how the chord itself is really kind of building up the tension in the mix, and then we'll relax that tension. And I'm not doing anything to create that. We're using an LFO to move the tone knob on the Desmodus Versio reverb. So we're basically shaping the reverb in real time. So here we're in a low here. Now I'm not going to touch anything. Can you guys hear the volume okay at home? I'll turn the clap off here. And turn our other tracks back on. And listen specifically to the tone of that chord stab and the reverb wash. Hear how it starts to get dark a little bit before the chord happens again? And we're evolving now. Now that chord stab hit quite a bit bigger than it did a minute ago. See how I'm not touching anything? But the jam is evolving. You can't hear that? Put your headphones on. You hear this big reverb crescendo? Even bigger now. Starting to bring it down now. It's the high frequency content of the reverb that I'm sculpting in real time with an LFO. So now we're sort of back in this deep pocket again. I'd say this is the flow. The raising up part of the reverb tone might be the ebb. We're going to listen again and let it completely do its movement and build up. Here we go. hear that movement? And again, I'm not controlling that in real time. That's the beauty of a really, really slow LFO that's just casually automating or modulating something in the background of your mix. In this case, it's literally just one knob, the automation of one knob that's allowing this to happen. Can you guys hear my voice okay versus the music today? I always worry about that as we get started. I don't want to be too quiet or too loud in the mix. If you hear any cracking or distorting, like I'm pushing too much level, just drop a note. We're gonna crescendo again. Something else that I'm really excited about getting to use today in this particular patch is the qubit chord module. I've had my eye on this ever since the very first video that I saw about it. It's kind of a pricey module, so I've sort of been saving up for this one, and this is the first time that we're getting this into a mix today. And I'm running basically just an F minor chord out of the qubit chord module, and I'm running that into the Mazatron quad cutoff, which is allowing me to basically shave off all of the high frequency content of this chord pad in the background. I'm going to roll this filter envelope up, not envelope, but cutoff, roll the cutoff up. You can hear the chord coming in. I'm not doing any modulation or movement at all on this chord pad. All I'm doing is sort of filtering it down in the mix quite a bit so that it literally just sort of blends with my chord stab and the tone that the reverb is putting out. You hear that tone in the background? I can still move it. I really like how that layers with my chord stab to help me create a much thicker melodic layer. And just one more element that I can mess around with in real time. All right, thank you. 15 people joining me. All right, I appreciate you being here. For those of you who don't know, I love the dub techno. So as you're tuning into these weekly patch labs, you're likely to get quite a few dub techno patches being created or being showcased at the beginning. I want to apologize for not doing a stream last week. It was the morning after the Halloween show. I did plan on doing a stream, but I was just too exhausted after the show to pull it off. So apologies for not being here last week. I really like being able to create this sort of automations that help the mix sort of start ebbing and flowing on its own. Obviously, it would be pretty amazing if I could program something out and then, start the clock and then just take my hands off and let the patch evolve on its own. But that's a pretty complicated thing to do. But I'm getting a little bit better at it each week, I think. Hey, thank you, Toballusion. I appreciate that. Thanks, Goya. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. The drums on this particular patch, we've got a kick drum, and that's that's coming out of it's a sample, basically, one of my kick drum samples. It's coming out of the Tip Top Audio 1 sample module. In fact, all of the drums today basically are, samples. Well, I guess we've got the noise algorithm and the cymbal algorithm. So if I turn the level of the reverb completely off, and that texture just fades out here, we can kind of hear in the background this noise algorithm and this cymbal that I've got on the open sort of hi-hat. This is our kick drum, our clap. Our clap is just a sample as well, coming out of the Tip Top Audio 1 sample module. I really like to use samples in my patches and whatnot. As a sample maker and as a sound designer, I really wanted to get a bunch of modules that would allow me to load samples in the system and play with those in the Eurorack environment. I actually was doing some experimenting this week trying to use the Disting EX Alpha as it's got an algorithm in it called 6 triggers, where it's going to allow you to trigger 6 individual samples and play those back. But it sort of was causing some skips and jumps in the patch, and I wasn't really able to get that one going this week, and that was a little frustrating. So we're using 2 Tip Top Audio 1 sampler modules today, and we're also using the Squarp Rample sample module today. But what's really key, I think, about the Squarp Rample sample player is that it just came out with a firmware update that allows you to now load stereo samples inside of the Rample. So you can either load 4 slots of mono samples, or we can load 2 slots of stereo samples. What I've got is I've got a stereo chord stamp generating our main tone in the mix. And what I've done is I've actually sampled 4 different versions of that sample where you're holding like a slightly different inversion of the chord, so that every time my main chord sample hits, it's going to be just a tiny little bit different in the mix as well. 4 different variations. By default, when you load a sample into the Squarp Rample sample player, it plays back that sample you've got in the slot in a random order. So if I've got these 4 different chord stabs, every time it triggers one of those, it's going to randomly pick which of those 4 samples to pull out. Okay, well, we're over 15 minutes, I think, with the intro patch here. I think it's probably time to go ahead and pull all of these cables today and attempt to patch something from scratch. That can sometimes get a little bit tedious, so I think I'll play some music in the background for you while we do that. This is a jam that I did on my channel back in 2018, and unless we have any questions, the spectral analyzer in the background, I'm running a headphone out of my main mixer into my audio interface, and then I run that into Ableton. And what I do is I've got Ableton open here, and I've got the FabFilter Pro Q3 equalizer plugin, which is my go-to and favorite EQ plugin. So it helps me look at the frequency content that we're actually putting out. And next to that, I've got the iZotope tonal balance control plugin. And that basically just helps me keep my frequency content as even as possible, especially when I'm working on headphones. It allows me to make sure we're not pushing like way too much low end, and maybe I don't realize that because I'm on the headphones, or maybe too much high frequency content that I maybe just don't realize because we're on the headphones. So it's FabFilter Pro Q3 on the left and tonal balance control from iZotope on the right. This is sort of my go-to configuration whenever I'm doing anything in here that's not actually producing inside of the DAW. I use these visualizers to help me keep the mix as even as possible. All right, so check out this little jam here, and we will... Whoa, that's loud. I hope that's not too loud. And we will go ahead and start pulling some patches today. I mean cables. Now normally I take quite a bit of time to do this, and I'm real methodical and, you know, clean. But we're going to try to go a little bit quicker than that for the purposes of the live stream. So bear with me. Now might be a time to grab yourself a cup of coffee and hang out for the patching session coming up. This is a remix I did of a track from my friend by Mark the Acid Clown Gardner. So a little bit of the acid vibe on this jam here. Hey, Nils, all right, thanks for joining me. I appreciate everyone hanging out. Yeah, spaghetti time, alright. Thanks for joining me. Hey, we got Redneck Samurai, we got Not Guilty, we got Goya, we got Toballusion and Ed B. Trovarsi in the chat. Thanks, everybody. We're getting there. All right. Let's see here. I'm gonna need to erase this, right? Yep. Trying to get some of my levels sort of back to square one here. Okay. Thank you, Not Guilty. It's taken a lifetime to get to this moment. I get asked a lot, you know, how do you have so much gear? How do you afford all this stuff? I'm not actually super wildly successful. It really comes down to the fact that I don't have any other hobbies. I've really devoted my life to electronic music on a daily basis, and this is really what I'm into. I don't drive a car. I don't really have a lot of other things or hobbies that I'm spending my income on. So And thanks a whole lot to PayPal Credit and Visa as well. This has sort of been like, like sort of a bucket list sort of thing for me that I always kind of assumed that someday, maybe in the twilight years or something, I might, try to get into Eurorack. But it's just something that really needed to happen at this time, I think, rather than like waiting till later. I think what we're going to do today is I've created 5 drum kits that I've created in the Squarp Rample sample player, and I think maybe we'll patch everything up so that we can listen to those 5 drum kits and then decide which kit to work with today. Let me see if I can't maybe get us a tiny bit closer with the camera as we move over to the patching. Yeah, push that down a little bit. All right. Got a cable on the floor. So the first thing that we need is we need a master clock and we need a reset signal. That way all of the sequencers in the system can work at the same tempo together and all of the sequencers can know when the downbeat is. So what I've got is I've got the Electron Digitact connected to the Poly-Ind Poly2 module. This is a MIDI to CV module. And what we're going to do is I've got it set up to send our master clock out of one of these patch points, and I'm going to go ahead and patch that into a multiple so that I can send our clock signal out to lots of different modules in the system as they need it. What we're also going to do is we're going to take a reset signal that I've already got set up coming out of the Digitact to another one of these CV connections, and we're going to run that into another multiple so that I've got my main clock and my reset signal available to be sent to any modules in the system that we want. And I think what we're going to do today is I think we're going to go ahead and use the Digitact to program the actual rhythms of the drums. So what we're going to do, let's see here. Cool. We might not even need ones that long. Yeah, we don't. I'm going to go ahead and plug in 4 triggers from the Poly-Ind Poly2. Whoops, my headphones are all weird today. I'm going to plug in 4 triggers to trigger the samples in the Squarp Rample so that we can hear them and decide which of these drum kits we'd like to work with today. Still a good time to grab a cup of coffee if you plan on hanging out. It's going to be just a few minutes before we actually get some sound going here. We've got the triggers plugged in. Awesome, and those are responding. Now we just need a way to plug these sounds into the mixer so that we can hear them back. So we'll take our first one, plug this into my kick slot. Maybe these. Cool. All right, now we've got some drums here. Nothing's mixed or anything. Oh, I see. This one's not really a kit, but rather just a kick and some toms. But, oops, 18, Dean. We might have some fun with that, actually, though. Let's check these kits out. I'm gonna move this camera just a little. I'm going to adjust the level once we actually pick a drum kit to get started with today. Not triggering that third sample. That's kind of a bummer. I like that kit. Let's try the next one. What's wrong with this one? I might have it on the wrong note. C, B, no, it's a D. What am I doing wrong here? Channel. I don't know. But it's not liking that third trigger for some reason. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe we can cheat and pull that out of this one instead. Let's just double check, see if we can. If not, we'll just move forward. Yeah, I don't know what that's about. Just try one more thing. The note, rather. Whoops. This. D. Alright. Well, I don't understand why we're not getting that last sample. Let me just check one more thing. No, we should be. That's so strange. Alright. These are new kits, so there's definitely a problem with something I'm doing. 21. Oh. Those sounds sound all right. All right, let's work with these sounds. And what we can do here is we can use the digitact to actually do the programming, but the sounds themselves are being housed in the Squarp Rample. And what we're going to do today is we're not going to do a 4 on the floor beat. We'll do something else. So what, like a broken beat. So what I'll do is kind of just put this hi-hat in. Cool. And now this is giving us sort of a, you know, a metronome. Then I can maybe punch in a little pattern here. Cool. Just going to bring the volume of these hats down, this hat down a tiny little bit while I work on the other sounds. And we'll just go ahead and record in real time. 2, 2, 3, 4. Put that clap in, maybe every other. Okay, cool. We're going to start working on these levels now. Let's go ahead and mute everything except for that kick drum. And let's mute that clap. And let me just turn this level up just a tiny bit on my mixer so that I can kind of get this looking like where the other was when we set the level for the dub techno track this morning. Okay, how are we doing on the volume? Don't you have 2 digitacts? I absolutely do have 2 digitacts. The digitact is literally my desert island tool, and you can really do so much with it. I don't often use both of them together at this time, but you know, there's only so many hours in the day, but there's plenty of projects coming. Yeah. Cool. Just kind of taking a look at my levels and EQ here and getting things set just a little bit. I like to sort of mix as I go, you know, the best we can. Kind of remove some of the low frequency content from these hi-hats. What I'm doing with the tonal balance control is they give you sort of a frequency spectrum range of what they consider to be the acceptable frequency range for bass-heavy music. That's just sort of the default setting that I'm using here. And I just sort of try to keep my frequency spectrum, try to keep that right about in the middle of that range so I know we're not pushing too much, you know, high frequencies and stuff like that. Get this clap back in the mix. How's that sounding? Can you guys hear that okay? Hey, what's happening? Doug in the house. Tony in the house. Hey, we got 26 people watching. I really appreciate you all joining me today. We've got a little beat started. I'm playing back samples from the Squarp Rample sample player, and we're using the Electron Digitact to sequence these. We're using the Poly-Ind Poly2 module to convert MIDI from the Digitact into trigger information to trigger these sounds. We've got a little beat started here. And I think what we're going to do today is I think we'll try to get a bass line happening from the Lifeforms SV1B semi-modular because it's just got a really great tone in it. And what let's do is let's go ahead and send our clock signal over to the second half of my system by taking the clock out from this multiple that I've routed our master clock into. And let's go ahead and route that clock signal into a multiple on this side of the system. I can go ahead and send that clock tempo into a sequencer. Actually, no, let's try something new today. Oh, that's great, in real time. Let's try the melodic digitalis from Noise Engineering. This is a really interesting sequencer, and I'm getting a lot of use out of it. I've only had it for a couple of weeks. Let's see if we can't get this going. The first thing that I'll do is I'll send it the clock signal so that the sequencer knows, what our tempo is. It's also going to need a downbeat signal so that it knows, reset signal so that it knows when the downbeat is. So I'll take a reset signal and we'll patch that in. Fantastic. That's working as expected. What let's do now is let's take, maybe one click longer. Let's take an output from the mimetic digitalis. Again, this is a CV sequencer. And let's run that into the input of the WMD devices, a 10, which is an attenuator. Basically, when we create a CV pattern in the mimetic digitalis, it's sending out lots of information over multiple octaves, huge amounts of note range. And what we're going to do is use an attenuator to bring the note range on these CV signals right down, so that it doesn't scroll through tons and tons of octaves of sounds. And we'll take an out from there. We're going to run this now into a quantizer. And what a quantizer does is it's going to take the pitches of voltage, the volt amounts that come into the quantizer, and it's going to quantize those to pitches in a scale that we've got set up. I've currently got it set to the F minor pentonic scale because that's my favorite key to write in. So it's currently going to take whatever note information, whatever CV information is coming out of the mimetic. We're going to be sculpting how wide that note range is using the attenuator from WMD devices. And then this quad quantizer from Tenderfoot Electronics is going to be locking those notes into a scale for us. That's a little complicated, but once you get it down, that's all it takes to get your pattern started melodically. Okay. We're going to be triggering here. So we're going to take our right. Okay, so this is a little bit new to me as well. We're taking the information from the quad quantizer and we're sending that into the CV thing from Bafako, which is allowing me to turn the CV information into actual 5-pin MIDI information. So I can take those notes and feed them into the Lifeforms SV1B or any other synthesizer that takes regular 5-pin MIDI. And we're going to continue experimenting with this. This is also the first live stream where I'm using the CV thing from Bafako to generate 5-pin MIDI. And the gate, right? Okay. Now we'll just go ahead and plug this in so that we can hear it. And thank you for your patience as we get going today, everyone. Whoops, I'm stuck here. Hey, Peter, thanks for joining me. 25 people on the chat. All right, I appreciate you being here with me, everyone. We're taking an output from the Lifeforms SV1B now. We're just going to route that into our mixer and turn that channel on. We're going to figure this out here. It's coming through really low. Ooh, we're getting there. Alright, so we're getting some stomp, some melodic information happening. Just kind of doing some randomization on the mimetic digitalis, and it spits out a different CV pattern each time I do that. And I'll just kind of do that until something sounds really cool. Just a way to create something randomly. That's cool. I wonder if we can make this a little bit more complicated. By not triggering every single 16th note, but rather to give us a more, I don't know, more interesting syncopation in the rhythm. Let's see if we can get one of these Mazzatron golden shower sequencers to control the amount of notes that we're getting in that bass line. So we'll just need a way to get the clock into the sequencer and also give it a reset signal. So we'll patch in the clock and we'll patch in the reset signal. And now, our sequencer knows when the downbeat is. Cool, right on. Here's our bass sound here. Turn the volume up here just a little bit for you guys. I think that might be better. Hey, thanks for joining me, Marcus. I appreciate you being here. You hear those little glitches that are kind of coming through on the bass? That's what we're going to try to sort of work around at this point. By using a sequencer to trigger the notes so that we're not just triggering every 16th note. Let's see if I can make this happen. Whoop, I'm stuck again. Now, the notes are being triggered using this sequencer here. So if I roll it up, we can get, this is the golden shower sequencer from Mazzatron. For those of you who haven't joined me before and heard me wax poetic about this, let me do that for just a moment. I really like this sequencer and I think it's fantastic to use. It's basically an 8-step trigger sequencer. And as we light up all of the steps here, it's going to play, you know, a trigger on each of those steps. But I can change the amount of steps just by rolling this knob here to any different rhythmic variation of 8 steps. And now our bass line is being triggered only when these notes are being triggered. So we can turn it into something a lot more tame if we want. And we can maybe start messing with the actual tone of the sound at this point. For instance, here's just a sine wave. If you can't hear that, put your headphones on. You can add kind of some square wave into there. I really like, for basses, I really like that combination of a sine wave for that low sub, and then a little bit of a square wave on top of that to get a little bit of bite so that you can sort of hear it punch through the mix a little. Let's make it a little longer. Cool. Let's get just one more note happening in this bass line. Dun, 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 dun. See if I can dial in the rhythm that I'm hearing in my head. Almost. So close. Ooh, almost. thicken up the bass by adding some saw wave. I'm not really about that, at least not today. We can also thicken up the bass by adding some sub. Not really about that today either. But what let's do is see if we can get some movement happening on this filter. You hear what happens when I move the filter cutoff on the bass? We could take it from really subby, low sound. We open up that filter, right? And we get some of those high frequencies coming through. It's a low pass filter. But let's see if we can get some movement to happen without me having to move the knob. All right, thanks for sticking around, everyone. What let's do is let's go ahead and use a sample and hold module. Let's use the DivKid random step module to send some sample and hold signals to move and open up this filter for us. What I'll do is I'll send our main clock signal into the DivKid random step module so that it's now triggering at our tempo. We'll start off all the way. We won't be attenuating this so that we can hear exactly what we're doing to the sound. Ooh. Ooh, I'm really liking where this is going, but I think what I want to do is to get this bass line a little bit more, I don't know, angry and distorted, I think. So I think we're going to go ahead and get the Electron Analog Heat MK2 into the mix, shall we? One of the things that I really wanted when I was picking out the modules to put this system together is I really wanted full compatibility. I wanted to be able to send outside MIDI into the system. I wanted to be able to send outside audio into the system. I also want to be able to send MIDI and CV out of the system, and I want to be able to send audio out of the system as well. What I'm doing is I'm using the Strymon AA1 module, and that's allowing me to send any audio signal out of the case to say something like a guitar pedal or an external processor. Today we're going to be using the Electron Analog Heat MK2, and then we're sending that back into the system so that we can process that from there as well. So what let's do is let's get this all connected, shall we? We're going to take our main output from this bass, and we're going to unplug that from the mixer so that we can plug this into the Strymon AA1 module and allow us to send this audio signal out of the case. Stereo in, stereo out. So this is getting the signal into the Analog Heat MK2, and I'll just adjust that input sensitivity, make sure we're not too loud, and we're not, that's fine. Maybe go back to the default preset, or maybe just some saturation to start with. And what we're going to need to do is take one of these really long patch cables and patch out. This is our signal coming back in from the analog heat, and we'll patch this across over, whoops, maybe I'll just extend this. Cool. Now, we've got the bass sound routed out of this system into the Electron Analog Heat. And I can sort of mess with some adjustments here. Maybe check out some different presets until something, you know, sounds awesome. Ooh. That's filthy. Wow, maybe too filthy. easily enough. All right. This also allows us to use, whoops, sorry about the volume there. This also allows us to use the filter inside of the MK2. And I really like being able to crank up this resonance. Maybe we leave it about there for now. Might be a little too loud in the mix. See if we can tame that a little bit. Just keeping it sort of dirty, but sort of back in the distance so that our drums can still punch over it. Ooh, that is dirty. Getting quite a lot of movement happening on the bass now. Adjusting the low frequency on the EQ here and the volume a little bit. Trying to kind of push that back in the mix so it's not fighting our drums so much. There's quite a bit of low frequency content coming out of this bass. Do a little bit of sculpting and getting things seated right at the beginning there. All right, maybe a little more drive from the heat. Ooh, that is nasty. I like that. Maybe some more resonance on this cutoff. All right, let's move forward, put something else in, shall we? Let's go ahead and see if we can't, I made some notes. Why am I reading my notes? Let's see here. We got the drum kit set up. Cool, right on. I wanted to explain a CV issue I'm having today. See if maybe somebody might have an idea on that. We'll get to that in a minute. Interesting. Let's see here. Bass is here, clap is there. I'm going to go ahead and just solo the bass line here. We're going to use another one of these tools that I've got set up in Ableton. This is the Mixed in Key plugin. I'm just going to double check that we're in key. It thinks we're actually in the key of E minor right now. So what I'm going to do is see if I can't fix that and get us into the key of F minor, so that it'll match with my other sounds a little bit more. And let's see here. I think the easiest way that we can do this is going to be to just simply take an output from our bass into my tuner here. And then we'll need to just swap this MIDI, pull this through. Here we go. I'm using the Roland A1 MIDI controller here. It's got CV outs, which I'm yet to test, but it's really super awesome for just a quick movable MIDI controller. Cool. So why am I not getting that to the tuner though? Oh, that's odd. What am I doing wrong there? We should be going right into the... Oh, I see. I'm on the wrong... Okay, cool. So, yeah, it's just a tiny little bit off. We're just a little bit shy of F2. Let me just move the fine-tuning around on this a tiny little bit. Actually, this is one... Yeah, cool. So close. Thanks for your patience while we get in tune here. All right. Fantastic. That should probably get us where we need to be. And so, this is a bonus cable. We're getting the output from here. Cool. And those are just muted. Yeah. Let's see here. Main. Let's get this MIDI back. All right. So now, hopefully, if I mute all these sounds again, based on the notes that we're sending out from the mimetic digitalis, this should be, our quantizer should actually be helping us a bit more than it is right now. Where it looks like we're in the key of D major, based on the random notes that have been coming out of the CV that I created in the mimetic digitalis, but we're not. And so, that's alright, that's alright. It still sounds cool. I think we're just going to go with that and try to match the other sounds to that today. That may or may not go to my advantage. Alright. But before we go any further, I actually need to swap the sample cards that are in my Tip-Top 1 sample modules. I've got 2 new cards to put in today for us to get some sounds from. And what I need to do is just turn the volume down for you guys at home, so when I click the system on and off, it's not going to make big clicks on your side. First thing we'll do actually is go ahead and save this drum kit so that it loads up the same when we turn the system back on. Fantastic. I'm going to shut you guys down for 1 second. Okay, and hopefully you can hear me again now. Okay, let's see here. What I've got on these new sample cards that I loaded into the Tip-Top 1 sample modules is I've got one that has just a whole bunch of melodic one-shots that are all tuned to C. The basses and pads and plucks and synthesizer sounds. And on the one on the right-hand side, I've got a whole bunch of sounds that I sampled out of the quasi-MIDI Revolution. Just random kick drum, snares, percussion sounds, you name it. So maybe we'll try to trigger something from those samples first. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and get another sequencer going. Move these cables just a tiny bit. I'm going to go ahead and send our master clock into another golden shower sequencer. We're going to need to also feed that sequencer our reset signal so that it knows when the downbeat is. Cool, now we've got our sequencer in time with the rest of the groove. And maybe I'll just put I'll leave that blank actually for now, while we scroll around for something to use for a sound. Go ahead and plug this in here, I think. Cool. So now the sounds that I'm playing are sounds that were sampled out of the Revolution, the quasi-MIDI Revolution vintage groove box. I've got all sorts of sounds in here. These are percussion sounds, obviously. Oh, that's kind of a cool one. Let's go ahead and see if we can use that sound, shall we? What let's do is we'll go ahead and trigger that from this golden shower sequencer. See if we can't maybe come up with a cool pattern to get that in the mix. Maybe bring the volume on this down a little bit. Where are we bringing this? Here? Cool. take a little bit of time to dial in a rhythm that I'm happy with, right? We can adjust the pitch of the samples. I really like the Tip Top 1 sample module because it's very, very simple, very, very straightforward. I can load up to 256 mono samples on the card and then just scroll through them in real time. We can have CV control over the pitch, so we can, control those sounds melodically if we want to. And we can also switch the CV so that when we send a CV signal into the module, it literally changes what sample it's playing back. I haven't actually experimented with that yet because I'm really just about triggering, specific sounds at this time. We can even scroll through some different sounds now that we have a rhythm. And that's definitely, I think, another benefit to using a sample module like this is being able to just create a rhythm and then just scroll through sounds quickly and easily until something maybe strikes you that fits into the mix. I think we'll go ahead and go back to that cool clap that we had originally. Actually, I think we're going to pass on this sound, and here's why. This is a great example. I'm glad this happened. What we're getting is I'm using, again, the tonal balance control from Isotope to help me keep these frequencies in line. And if I turn the volume up on our new sound, we can see that it's really pushing a little strangely, and I'll show you what I mean. In fact, can I just do this? You see this peak right here? That's kind of, looking like it doesn't belong. That's actually coming from that new percussion sound that we just added to the mix. And now, if I was producing this in Ableton or whatnot, I would just grab an EQ plugin and I would just, work on those frequencies a little bit until it wasn't pushing out of the mix quite so heavily. But I don't really have those kinds of tools here in the Eurorack at this time. So we're going to go ahead and choose a different sound that's not peeking out of the mix in a strange way. This is definitely one of the reasons why I use these visual tools, is to help in sound design and choosing what sounds you're going to work with together. In fact, that's kind of a cool percussion sound that's sort of giving a little interesting rhythm against our kick drum. Bring this bass line down a little bit. Here we go. Now we're talking. We've just locked. If you can't hear that at home, put your headphones on. Maybe just a tiny bit less on the bass still. It's always difficult to make these finite adjustments when I'm getting started and I'm working on headphones. At this point, if I'm working on headphones, and I'm not doing a live stream, I might take the time to turn the speakers on for a minute and verify that what I've got is a nice foundation to continue building on. But for these live streams, we just kind of go forward the best we can. All right, I think this is sounding pretty nice. We've got kind of an underground groove happening here, kind of a halftime. But that big, huge bucket snare helping us push through. And we actually have another clap sound that we can bring back in, if you guys remember from the beginning. Let's definitely get that going. All right. Our mix is pretty dry sounding at this time because there's no effects of any kind in the mix. There's no reverb or delay or anything. So I think maybe what we'll do is get a little bit of atmosphere happening in the mix. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take our hi-hat sound, and instead of feeding that directly into the mixer, we'll just take a splitter cable. We're going to take a splitter from that hi-hat. We're going to run one of those right back into the mixer. Okay, so our hi-hat's back to where it was a minute ago, but I'm going to run another signal from that hi-hat into the Desmodus Versio reverb from Noise Engineering. We'll send a little bit of level there. And what we'll do is just need a way to plug in the Desmodus now to our mixer. So we'll go ahead and do that. Cool. Now I've got a clean version of the hi-hat. Turn some other sounds down here for a second. Okay. I'll find a way to turn that off next. But we've also got the hat, and it's running through this reverb. We can adjust, you know, how much or how little we'd like to be going through the reverb, because we have a clean signal going directly into the mixer. So even if I tuck this wet signal, let me fix this routing. Even if I tuck the wet signal way back into the mix, we still got quite a bit of rhythm coming through from that dry signal. We can adjust those as needed. Let's hear the beat for just a minute with no other sounds, no bass. That is a punchy beat. All right. Does that bass line sound okay? Well, I know most of you are probably listening on phones or iPads. I don't know if you can hear such a low bass line coming through. What I've done with the bass line is we've taken it, we've routed the Lifeforms SV1B into the Strymon AA1 module, which allows me to route audio into and out of this system. So I'm routing the audio from the bass into the Electron Analog Heat MK2 to dirty it up quite a bit more. And then we're running that audio signal back into the system as well. It's the Strymon AA1 module that allows me to do this. It's basically meant so that you can take any signals in your system and run those out to their pedals and whatnot. But it actually works with any external processing to get the signal, the audio, into and out of your system. Boy, that is fat. But if we look here at the groove, let me go back in close again. I'm gonna just grab this phone. You can see now that all said and done, even without any actual EQ, we're not doing too bad, and our frequencies are lining up pretty darn well with what we would consider to be, you know, bass-heavy music. Hopefully that sounds okay at home. So we've got this funky bass. The bass is being, we've got a sample and hold signal, which is locked to our patch's tempo, which is moving the cut off a little bit. So there's a little bit of filter movement in our sound. Then we just dirty that up with the Analog Heat MK2. So we just added, yeah, this is working. Kind of a low sound to play with against the kick drum. Cool. I think what we'll do is try to get a second version of the bass line happening before we go any further. And let me see if I can move the camera just a little bit to show you how we're going to do that. I'm using the melodic digitalis to create the melodic content for our bass line. If I select the first slot, rather, and hit save and 1, it's going to save now what we've created. And I can go over to the second slot, I believe. I can go load 2, right? Yeah. And now we can go load shred. Ooh, that is low and weird. I think we're going to go with that. So we're going to go save and 2. But now I can get us back to our original bass line by pressing load and 1. Now I can get us back to that variation by pressing load and 2. Awesome. That is what I am talking about. And that right there is exactly why I chose the melodic digitalis. to run this through a quantizer to lock it to a scale, and then be able to just literally randomize patterns until something sounds good. We didn't do any programming. All we did was just randomize again. It's keeping the notes in key because we've got them through a quantizer, and at any time we can just change our pattern now. We can go back and forth between these different bass lines and create some movement. I could keep going with this and create up to 8 different variations of that bass line. And I could also send different CV controls to other modules in the system. The melodic has 4 different outputs. You can send those outputs to the pitch of a module to get, melodic content as we're doing here. Or you could send those to a modulation input, like a pitch input or a filter input, to get some other movement happening there as well. I think this is an amazing module so far, and I'm really happy with it. Cool. Well, it thinks we're in the key of D major. So what we'll do, I'm going to see if we can create, I don't really think we're in the key of D major. I know some of you at home who listen in are really good with your music theory and can kind of figure this out a lot, but I'm a little bit maybe not as versed in music theory as I could be per se. What we're going to do though is we're going to try to add something from the qubit chord module. And what I'll do is I'll just take the output of the root note there, and we're going to go ahead and just see if we can't tune that to a D. Almost. Come on, little guy. All right. So close. Cool. Now, if I take a mix out, I'll need a longer cable, then we should be able to actually hear a nice chord pad tone, and then we can decide what we'd like to do with that in the mix. I'm gonna go ahead and patch that in here. Let me start messing with this and see if we can get it to slide in the mix. Oh, that was the, I see what I've done there. That's the wrong knob. Thanks for your patience, everyone, while I attempt to fix my tuning error that I just made here. I'm gonna get this back to a D. So, okay, perfect, nice. Okay. So rather, it's this here, right? Okay. Wow, maybe it is a D major. For those of you who have hot ears, let me turn all these down. Where's the hat coming through? Is it here? No. Cool. That sounds in key. But my ears are 47 years old. Does that sound in key to everyone else? I think that is in key. Are we really in the key of D major? Wow. Oh, come on. So the chord module from qubit basically has some, like, I'm not sure of the numbers, I've just gotten this module, but it has some banks of waveforms, and when you select a waveform, it allows you to kind of scroll through that waveform and get different sort of tonal properties. It's really capable of putting out a lot of different tones and textures. Cool. What let's do is let's create some sort of a rhythmic pattern that's happening on the chords, shall we? Sounds in key to me. Thanks, Tony. So what we'll do... Sorry, I'm always doing quite a bit of volume faffing about so that I'm not just shouting at you guys the whole time over just a constant, 4-measure beat. I think we're going to go ahead and take a mix out of the chords, but we're going to want to run that into an envelope. So I'll need a bit of a longer cable here. Now, another cool thing about the qubit chord module is it has outputs for the root note of the chord, for the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th, so that you could take 4 different outputs individually and maybe do some panning on those or individual EQ on those and really help create even a more thicker and a more robust sounding pad sound. But today we're just going to run out from the main mix of all of the notes together in one output. And we're going to run that into the Javelin envelope from WMD Devices. And now I just need a way to trigger the envelope as to what sort of a rhythm we might like to have these chords play back. And let's attempt to do some sort of a Euclidean thing today, shall we? I'm going to send our main clock signal to a Euclidean sequencer, and we're also going to need to send our reset signal to that sequencer so that it knows when the downbeat is. So we'll route in our reset signal. Getting quite a bit of spaghetti. A few minutes ago, this was completely empty. We're going to go ahead and stop and start our clock to get all of our sequencers now rolling at the exact same tempo. And we're going to take an output from this Euclidean sequencer. This is the 2HP Euclid sequencer. And we're going to use that to trigger the gate envelope that we are running this sustained chord sound into. And this is going to allow us to create a rhythm, like a gated rhythm on the chord, so that it's not just a static sound. Start by putting this here. So we have already got a bit of a rhythm happening based on the Euclidean rhythm that's what's already in the sequencer from where I had it last time. It's kind of cool. We can adjust now. Oh! Okay, for those of you who might not be real familiar with my channel and what I'm about, I really, really like the grooves that have big, fat, pounding drum beats, hard basses, and chilled melodics coming over the top. So when I hear these delicious chord stabs kind of bouncing around these drums, yeah, I'm totally about this sort of a vibe. And what let's do is let's go ahead and route this to our reverb as well, so that we have control over the dry mix of this sound, but we can also have control over the wet mix of this sound. And what we're going to do is we're literally just going to take a splitter cable, and we're going to take, let's see here, that out from the envelope. We're going to send one side of this cable to our reverb. If I turn that up, oh, forget about it. I just want to just take a moment and express my deep love for the Desmodus Versio reverb. Oh, come on. Now we'll take the other side. So if I want, I can have, as much of the dry chord coming through the mix to make sure we get the punch of it. but I can also drown it in that reverb if we want, to start getting some texture going. And we can choose exactly as much reverb or as little reverb as we want. Now, for those of you who were with me at the beginning when I was showing the patch in the system that was ebbing and flowing and kind of doing some movement based on automation of the tone of the reverb, let's see if we can't create something similar to that here. We've now got two sounds that are going through the reverb, and if I play with the tone of this reverb, you might hear how we're able to kind of sculpt the background ambience. Very slowly I'm moving the tone knob. Let's go ahead and see if we can't automate that. And what we'll do, let's see here. Let's take an LFO. I'm going to take a triangle LFO out of the DivKit Oct module, which is basically 8 triangle wave LFOs that don't sync to tempo. And you can use these to really add kind of a humanistic kind of, vibe to your patch because they're not super snapped to the grid. I'm going to run that into the Quadrat attenuator from IntelliGel so that I have control over this LFO. By default, the LFO is running its full width of range, every time, but an attenuator allows us to shape the scale of the range of that LFO. So we can have a little bit of movement from an LFO or a lot of movement from an LFO, modulating our sound based on using an attenuator. Okay. So I'm routing the output of this LFO into the tone input on the Desmodus Versio reverb. And instantly we hear the reverb start shifting in the background. It's almost dry now. Now it's coming back. And we can adjust exactly how much of that movement on the reverb tone with the attenuator. Putting the reverb a little bit more wet to the mix. And turning down our dry signal of the chord a little bit. You can really get a lot of different tonality out of the chords module by moving the waveform or the bank, which chooses which waveform you're working with. But here I'll just scroll the waveform setting back and forth so you can hear what I mean as we kind of morph through this wave. Hear the range of tone that we can get. This is just one waveform out of a bank of waveforms. You could automate this movement as well, whether like something fast or something really jumpy maybe. But what I'm liking so far is just kind of scrolling through the waveform until that tone just kind of seems to lock. Make it so we can turn some of these sounds on and off in real time. I like to be able to, turn things on and off in real time and turn these little grooves that I'm creating into something a little bit more jammable that I can actually interact with. So for instance, if we take our kick drum and we take the trigger that is triggering that kick drum, and instead of routing it directly into the module, we route it into the DivKit mutes module, I can then turn that CV that's triggering the kick drum on and off in real time. There we go. Now I can turn the kick drum on and off in real time. Let's go ahead and do that with the other drum sounds. So I'll take our second drum sound, which is this snare drum sound. And instead of patching the trigger directly into the module, I'm patching the trigger into the DivKit's mutes module so that I can literally turn the trigger that's triggering the snare drum on and off. Rather, it's the gate, and it's the second one. Cool. So now I can turn the snare drum and the kick drum off in real time. Let's go ahead and do the same for the other sounds. That we have control over these in real time, and we can turn them on and off and have more of a jam than just something always going as a big wash of sound. Bring that other clap back up into the mix. And let's make it so that we can turn that clap on and off in real time, shall we? Cool. I like in these lab sessions how we go from a blank slate to a whole bunch of cables everywhere every week. Now, there we go. Now I've got all the drums available to be turned on and off in real time. Cool deal. Typically, I won't be needing to turn the bass line on and off, I don't think, because that's really the meat of our, groove. But I might like to be able to turn these chords on and off in real time. That might be cool. You can hear right away, as soon as I turn them off, we get a little bit of that reverb trail hanging out. Then we focus in on the bass line for a little bit. And 1, 2, 3, turn it back on, kind of a thing. That'd be cool. So what let's do is make it so we can do that. I'm going to route the CV into another I have 2 DivKit mutes modules for a total of 8 switches that I can route tracks on and off with. Switch these inputs. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. And now I can switch these on and off in real time as well. So we can turn our drums off, turn the chord off. Maybe, I don't know, play with the bass line for a sec. I think what this groove is really missing is some sort of a high tempo, like hi-hat. We've got kind of a mellow hi-hat sound, but it's, doing a pretty slow rhythm. I think what we need is like a 16th note pattern over the top of this, maybe to tie the speed of the groove together. I know we're doing a halftime groove here, but maybe if we add some double time over the top of it, it'll help really bring the whole thing together. Wow, Redneck Samurai, I don't know how you do that. That is amazing. Amazing. Hey, Jamie. Yeah, the hat is a little static. I totally agree. What let's do is let's see if we can create some 16th note noise hats using a noise algorithm from the Blue Lantern module's version of the braids module from Mutable Instruments. What we can literally do is just feed in our main clock signal, which is a 16th note, pattern, into the gate of this module. And we can take an output of this module and just feed that over here. Turn this up for you guys. And we're already getting what I'm after. Very subtle in the background. But once I turn the other tracks off, you can hear it pretty well. And we can actually do some, change the pitch on this, or really gently change the timbre of the sound. If we do a little automation, and let's do that. A little bit of mixing and bringing all of our sounds back in that we've created so far. I'd like to be able to turn this noise on and off, that's for sure. So instead of routing our trigger signal directly into the module, we're going to go ahead and route the trigger signal into the DivKit mute module, and then we'll take an output from that and run that into the input. So now I can, this one. So now I can turn that on and off in real time. Cool. Bringing the level of that clap up just a little. That one. So now we have kind of a double time hat thing going here, but we can automate this to give it a little bit more life. And let's do just that. Let's take an LFO and route it into the color. These are going to be very, very subtle automations. You can hear it there, kind of coming through. Bring this down in the mix a little bit so that it just kind of tucks that rhythm into the back of the mix. Yeah. We can maybe mess around with how long this sound is. If we want it, we can make it quite a bit longer and more dramatic. I think we're going to keep it pretty short today and tuck it back a little further into the mix. Yeah, just so it's barely there. That's nice. Cool. What I'm really hearing is a ride cymbal coming through over the top of all of this, and I think there's even room in the frequency spectrum that we could pull that off, but I don't have access to a ride cymbal at this time. I don't have a module that really specifically is for that sort of a tone. And I might, you know, use just like a sample slot to put like a 909 or an 808 ride in here, but I've got all my sample slots filled up at this time as well. I actually realized this week that I'm still in need of more sample modules, believe it or not. Would love to add a ride right now, and that's how I would do it. I would do it with adding just a ride sample. There's definitely something to be said for having modules that are specific to getting your sounds. Like I have a module that's specific for getting kick drum sounds, and you can just plug in and go. But there's also something to be said, I think, for being able to use samples in a system like this. That way you can have sort of any sounds in the world and not just the sounds that are limited to whatever modules you've got specifically. The modules that I've chosen are really a lot of melodic modules and then a lot of samplers. The only specific drum module that I have currently is the Bifaco kick-all. So all of the rest of my drum sounds and whatnot are typically coming from samples. This sounds pretty nice though. Now, you remember that, you remember that we're controlling this chord with a sequencer. So at any time, I can change the way that the chord is behaving as well by just changing the rhythm. I think I'm actually affecting the wrong channel here. Let me try a different one, which might be the correct one. Nope, this is our bass. Ooh, it's a whole new vibe with that bass. Nope, not quite as good as it was though. That's the bonus to using a sequencer to control the envelope and the trigger rhythms of your melodic sequences, is that you can fuss with the triggers and get a new rhythmic pattern. So let's try to do that again. I think the bass is seated again in the mix and we're kind of grooving. But let's say we want to change that up, right? All we have to do chords are actually being triggered by this Euclidean sequencer, which we can change. Do you hear how the chords are triggering differently now? We've created a different rhythm there. So as I'm creating something like this, I'm thinking about, being able to turn the tracks on and off. I'm thinking about the fact that I'm controlling certain things with sequencers that I can change in real time. And the goal would be that when the patch is finished, that it's something you can, actually jam and ebb and flow and interact with in real time by changing up patterns in real time. Hey, Obi Shaky! I've been compared to Bill Hader a few other times in my life. I really like Bill Hader. That's a cool comparison. Right on, man. Oh, yeah, 132 hi-hats would be killer. I think I would be able to achieve like 30-second notes if I sent my main clock, which is 16th notes, to a multiple, not a multiple, a multiplier, excuse me, and then maybe to multiply that by 2 would give us 30-second notes. I'm not real versed on the multiplying my clocks. So far I've only divided them. I think this is a pretty cool groove that we put together. Let's see if we can get one more sound in here. Do I have another input we can feed it into? Yeah, maybe. I've got another Blue Lantern Modules braids module here, and it's currently set on the cymbal algorithm, which is going to produce like anything from sort of like an 808 sort of hi-hat to like a longer tone. And maybe we can get a pattern to happen from this as well. So I'll first get another sequencer started by sending it our main clock signal and a reset signal. Here's that reset signal. Perfect. And here's our main clock signal. Helps if you plug the cable in all the way. Cool. Now, if I just take an output from this sequencer and we run that into the gate input of this cymbal, starting to get low on my favorite cables here. Let's see what we've got. All right. All right, let's do this. Let's, oh, I see, I don't have control over that volume, so let's make, okay, here's what we're gonna do. I'm out of actual inputs from my mixers where I can adjust the level. And this is where, I don't know if you can see this on the live stream, I know we're limited to low resolution, but this is an inline attenuator from Mazatron, and basically it just allows you to adjust the volume of a sound with this knob right here. All I have to do is plug, you know, let's see here, we're going to plug the input into the input, and then I'll plug the output into the output where I want this to actually go here. And now, even though I don't have an actual knob on the input to control the volume, I can control the volume of that sound with this knob right here. So we can fade it in or fade it out. I can just kind of tuck it where it needs to go. It's kind of like a ride bell tone coming through here. Well, that's really nice. That's really helping to even out our high frequency content. Maybe tuck that back in the mix a tiny little bit more. And maybe give ourselves the ability to turn this on and off. I routed everything else from the trigger into a mute module. So let's do the same for this so that we have the ability to turn this signal on and off whenever we'd like to. Go ahead and output to the input. And now, turn all these drums off here. Okay, so we're taking the output here. It's supposed to be to the gate gain. There we go. So now I can turn that on and off as well. I really like the DivKit mutes modules so that I can turn tracks on and off. Again, I have 2 of them, so I have 4 switches that allow me to route things through them and turn them on and off in real time. Hear how amazing and full that reverb is when it comes in from the Desmodus Versio? Oh my gosh. 2, 2, 3, let's get that. You could also take sound, actual, content, sound content from the Digitact and route that into the system, sequence it from the Digitact. Like if I want to add another sound or like a crash cymbal over the top of this, I could easily program that in the Digitact and then route that into the system. Unfortunately, I've already got more modules than are fitting in what I've got here already. So my second Strymon AA1 module to be able to bring in sounds from another external source is currently not in the system. I'm waiting on a large and very, hopefully, amazing custom Eurorack case being built right now. And when that gets here, I'll be able to fit all of my modules in it. We'll be able to hopefully get a little bit better camera work on these live streams as well. But until then, I'm limited what modules I can use, so I don't have the Strymon AA1 extra in here. Otherwise, I would start routing in more sounds using the Digitact. Now, something else to keep in mind is not only can I, change the bass line in real time, mute tracks on and off in real time, but we've programmed the drums using the Digitact. So I could very easily just copy this pattern over to another pattern and program a different beat on the drums. And that's a definite benefit to using the Digitact as a way to sequence some of these things. Well, we've been almost about an hour and 50 minutes on the stream today. I'd say we're probably going to be wrapping it up soon. I'm running out of modules to bring new sounds into the mix with. But if anybody has any questions, I want to be available at the end of these live streams for a good few minutes for any possible Q&A what you've got. I know a lot of people ask some complicated questions under my videos sometimes. Now would be a great time to get like some interaction if you've got something complicated that you want me to try to help you with. I definitely want to be available for that sort of Q&A. I know that I'm a bit new to the Eurorack, but I've been producing music and making sound packs and sound banks for over 20 years. So I have a lot of experience if you want to ask questions from anything at all related to music production. That is a really great question, MagLab. I appreciate that. I've actually been having quite a bit of a time getting my reset and my clock situation sorted. What I'm doing is I'm taking a very, very fast trigger signal out of the Electron Digitact, and I'm routing that into my system using the Poly-IND Poly2 MIDI to CV module. I'm sending that trigger into a multiple so that I can send that trigger out to all of the sequencers that I need to create the reset signal. And it's hitting at the beginning of every 8 bars. So basically, It's the equivalent of using a divided by 128 clock to get that 8-bar division. To get that reset signal. How difficult would it be to sequence a whole song structure? That's definitely something that I am trying to answer myself, and I've got some ideas on how to get some tracks to be able to turn on and off in real time using a VCA. If I'm sending, for instance, what we just talked about, like a divided by clock signal to 100, divided by 128, for instance, if I feed that into a VCA, which is a voltage-controlled amplifier, it allows the volume of a sound to come through or not come through. What I can do is I can actually use that clock signal to turn the track on and off in real time. For instance, if I found out that if I fed the divided by 128 clock into a VCA, that it will literally basically mute and unmute that track every 8 bars. So that would allow us to turn the track on not manually, but automatically every 8 bars, basically, and turn it off. What I'm currently interested in is potentially finding a clock divider that will go to lower, or rather higher divisions, so that I can get like divided by 256, and then I would be able to turn a track off every 16 bars. And I figure if I were to route this creatively and have some tracks turning on and off every 4 bars, some tracks turning on and off every 8 bars, and some tracks turning off and on every 16 bars, if we could even get lower and do a divided by 512, that's going to give us 32 bars where things are turning on and off by themselves. So I know that there's other ways to do it, and depending on what sort of a sequencer you're using and how you're controlling the devices with that sequencer, you could have more than one, pattern in the sequencer, and you could program quite a few patterns in a sequencer to, have an actual song structure. But I'm really interested in seeing what I would be able to do to create the tracks to turn on and off by themselves, and to create sort of an arrangement that just sort of goes whether you're controlling it or not. And then over the top of that, you might be making some adjustments to other things like filters, or turning effects on and off, or muting tracks on and off in real time as well. But the system would kind of be almost arranging it for you like another set of hands. I don't really have, that completely set up yet, but that's definitely something that I'm looking to get set up when I get the larger system put together. It's something that I've been kind of thinking through how to achieve. Because, you could trigger these chords, for instance, to turn on and off every 8 bars. Maybe you have another track that turns on when the chords turn off. Trying to sort of figure all this stuff out. I'm definitely still a beginner in using the Eurorack gear. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing these streams at this point in my journey, so that I can share the learning process with all of you. Another neat thing about these DivKid mute modules is you don't actually have to turn the track all the way on and all the way off each time. If you just press the trigger to the left, it just temporarily brings the track in. And then when you let go, a spring pushes the switch back. So I can just kind of bring on a track just by tapping to the left on the switch. So we have the chords, in the background, and at any time I could just bring in a casual emphasis hit or an accent hit. So we don't actually have to turn everything on and off in real time. Hey, thanks for tuning in, Flip Mode. I appreciate that. can't stress this enough if you're interested in Eurorack, but this is a little bit intimidating to get into the real world or maybe cost prohibitive. I would definitely recommend checking out VCVRack on the desktop, which is a virtual Eurorack environment, or MyRack on the iPad, which is pretty much a sort of the same version as VCVRack, but on the iPad. Both come with lots and lots of modules, and you can really get lost in them. Yep, it is Eurorack. This is modular synthesis. And what that means basically is that you'll pick different modules depending on exactly what you would like to build. Those modules will all do different things, and then we can patch them together in different ways to create lots of different sounding grooves using those same modules. We have some modules for things like drum sounds. We have some modules for things like mixers and filters and tuners. We have some modules for things like effect sounds, like reverb and delay. And one of the things that makes Eurorack so interesting, so exciting, and so personal is that these are modules that I've chosen specifically to create the kind of giant instrument that I'm interested in. Basically, what I've created here is a very, very large hybrid groove box. I have sampling modules that allow me to load mono samples into those and trigger those the same way that I would trigger other Eurorack modules, except now I've got my own sounds and samples in them. You've got modules rather that you can pick out for like snare drum sounds specifically or kick drum sounds specifically, depending on the kind of grooves that you'd like to make that, will help you decide what sort of modules you'd like to put in a system. Some people are interested in building a really large, robust polyphonic synthesizer. Some people are interested in creating just a really large effects box that they can customize and tweak while sending other audio signals through that. But me, I'm really interested in being able to do everything in one system. I'm looking to have a very large, very hybrid, and very robust Eurorack system that will hopefully allow me to create full and finished music as I continue learning the process. If you're interested in Eurorack, please join me. We're doing this every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're showing a patch, and then I pull all of the cables, and we patch something from scratch every Sunday. We go really slow, and I'm trying to make it as beginner-friendly as I can, talking about exactly what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and why I'm doing it. Oh, yeah. The semi-modular on the right is the Lifeforms SV1B by Pittsburgh Modular. I'm really enjoying using it for bass sounds. It's just deep and rich and robust. It's actually the first piece of hardware modular gear that I picked up. It allows you to plug in 5-pin MIDI into it and get that, talking to the unit. You can also use these patch points to patch it into your system, which we're doing here today. I've got a sample and hold module that's moving the filter for us in real time. It's just a really nice and robust kind of all-in-one synthesizer, it's got a filter, it's got a mixer, it's got an envelope, all of the things that you need to create different tones and basses and leads. It's got white noise, it's got square waves, a sine wave, a triangle wave, and a saw wave. So you could really mix waveforms between the two oscillators. The problem is it's such an amazing piece of gear that being the first piece of actual hardware Eurorack that I picked up, within just a few minutes of playing with it and hearing the sonic tones that were coming out of it, I knew immediately that, you know, hardware Eurorack was going to be something for me, and that it was really time to take the absolute plunge and go further. So be careful with something like the Lifeforms, because it can actually change your life. This one is actually the Lifeforms SV1B, which I watched a few videos on trying to figure out what the actual differences would be from their first generation Lifeforms SV1 to this one. And they're really not that many differences. It looks a little tiny bit different in the color scheme. And Richard from Pittsburgh Modular said that they're constantly just doing these little tiny subtle tweaks to the code to make things a little bit, I don't know, more refined. But he doesn't, I've seen him talk about it 3 or 4 times, and he doesn't really have anything specific as to why, you know, what might actually be different with the zeros and ones between this one and the first model. So I might say, if you're interested in maybe putting your foot in the door of real world module, to maybe take a look at the first generation Lifeforms SV1B, because I'm guessing they're probably available used at a greatly reduced price, but really featuring pretty much the same functionality as the SV1B. We're getting the bass sound out of the SV1B. And if I take away the sample and hold, you can hear just the more full, rich tonality of the sound. We can get way down there with it. And here I'm using the sample and hold just to move the filter cutoff a little bit and give us that kind of underground feel to the vibe. Yeah, this was a really fun one today. I think the takeaway for me is just my appreciation really just keeps growing for this reverb, the Desmodas Versio. And this is my first week working with the chord module from Qubit. And boy, the tones that are coming out of this just on first few, plays with are just everything that I wanted it to be. And I can't wait to keep using this module to create pads and chord stabs in the patches. I think we're going to call it today. I think this is possibly my longest live stream to date. We've just been over 2 hours. Yeah, not cheap. That's the thing. This has really been sort of like, it's taken a lifetime to get where I'm at. I've been a sound designer and a sample maker for over 20 years. And it's taken, that long of the journey to finally, break the ice and actually get started with Eurorack. I think it helps to kind of have some sort of a knowledge in music production and synthesis before you're trying to get started with like the actual components per se. It's really helped me in the journey, at least, like to have that understanding of how to program a regular synthesizer beforehand, to know what envelopes are, attack, decay, sustain, release, things like that, to know how to use reverb, to know how to use filters and distortion and resonance and things like that to your advantage will all really help you understand what you're actually doing with Eurorack. And I can't stress this enough, a great way to get in the door and start playing with these kind of tools, but save yourself some money, is to check out VCVrack on the desktop or MyRack on the iPad to get playing with some virtual modules. A lot of fun to be had there. All right, we're going to go ahead and call it today. I really appreciate everyone watching. And again, every Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we're going to be doing more Eurorack Patch Labs. So please join me.